Chapter 943. On this day, the people waiting outside suddenly discovered that the numbers on the invisible barrier were flashing rapidly. From 1 to 10, there wasn't much of a pause. After that, it continued to rise, from 11 to 14, and finally to 15. It's Yi Chen. Yi Chen is challenging the sword world again. Apart from the Azure Sky Sword Emperor, no one else could reach the 15th level of the sword world. Apart from the Azure Sky Sword Emperor, there was only Yi Chen who created a miracle a week ago. In the 15th level of the sword world, Yi Chen had already killed 74 swordsmen, 32 more than the previous time. His improvement was obvious. Swinging his sword light swept out. At the price of losing his left arm, Yi Chen killed another 6 swordsmen, bringing the total number of kills to 80. 82. 83. Yi Chen's head suddenly flew up. A swordsman leaped up and chopped off Yi Chen's head. However, Yi Chen, who had lost his head, took advantage of the fact that his body had yet to dissipate to stab the swordsman's heart. 84. This was the second time that Yi Chen challenged the 15th level of the sword world. The first time, it was 42. This time, it was 84. The improvement was huge. Challenging the sword world was too exhausting. Just like the previous time, Yi Chen didn't continue. Instead, he sat cross-legged in the void and rested. Failed. After a long time, no numbers flashed. Everyone knew that Yi Chen had failed again. Some even stood up and left this place. Some of them had been waiting here all along, and some had joined later. Those who joined later actually wanted to see Yi Chen and see if he had grown 3 heads and 6 arms. However, Yi Chen still didn't come out. They immediately knew that they wouldn't be able to see him in person for a short period of time. Instead of waiting here in vain, they might as well find something proper to do. Let's go. The 15th floor isn't that easy to pass. The higher you go in the sword world, the harder it is to pass. Yi Chen has only raised his sword domain to the 3rd level. I dare to bet that he won't be able to pass through the 15th floor without 3 to 5 months of training. That makes sense. Every level of the sword domain requires one to grasp more details. Otherwise, the Azure Sky Sword Emperor wouldn't have been stuck at the 3rd level of the sword domain for so many years. Go! I still want to wait. Of course, there were also people who didn't change their minds. Idiot, just wait here for nothing. What a waste of time. This time, instead of waiting for a week, Yi Chen went to challenge the sword world after only 3 days. Failure. It was another failure. But something worthy of gratification was that Yi Chen had killed 156 swordsmen in the 15th level of the sword world, and he was only 8 away from doubling the number. Moreover, the sword domain showed a trace of budding. Another 3 days passed. Yi Chen had killed 258 swordsmen, 285 swordsmen, 300 swordsmen. In the blink of an eye, it had already been 20 days since Yi Chen had arrived here. During the first 10 days, his improvement was extremely great, but during the last few days, his improvement became slower and slower. Yi Chen knew that he was almost at his limit. Not to mention doubling the number of swordsmen, it was as difficult as ascending the heavens to be able to kill a few more every time. The extent of his improvement was getting smaller and smaller. On the 24th day, Yi Chen had killed 333 swordsmen. When he killed the 333 swordsmen, Yi Chen faintly felt that the sword domain had stirred. But he was helpless as he was instantly killed. This won't do. As time passes, this budding will gradually weaken. In the end, I might lose this rare opportunity to break through. I absolutely can't waste it. Without resting, Yi Chen's eyes were red as he tried to enter the sword world again. From the 1st level to the 14th level, Yi Chen had to expend several times more energy than usual. This was because he was too tired. This kind of fatigue wasn't physical, but mental. The potential that people often talked about was actually the potential of the heart and soul. When the heart was strong enough, it could ignore the weakness of the body and burst out with power that far exceeded the past. Now, Yi Chen's mind was very tired, and so was his body. As a result, when he reached the 15th level, Yi Chen had only killed the 15th swordsman, but he already felt powerless. Explode for me! Yi Chen roared. The treasured sword was like an exploding star. The sword light that was thrust out was extremely fast and ruthless. Each move and style contained great power. PFFF, 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 PFFF. A row of swordsmen fell. They didn't even feel how they were stabbed. But to Yi Chen, this wasn't enough. More swordsmen rushed up. At this moment, Yi Chen was in a state of extreme selflessness. His treasured sword was constantly stabbing and slashing. His body was like a marionette, flickering and shifting at an extraordinary speed. Row after row of swordsmen fell. Yi Chen's body emitted a heart-palpitating aura. The aura was like a saber or a sword, slowly merging into Yi Chen's sword domain. Just like this, Yi Chen endured one limit after another. The number of swordsmen he killed quickly broke through 500, then 600, 700. But when 720 people fell, Yi Chen once again felt powerless. This kind of powerlessness came so quickly that Yi Chen's left leg was cut off by a sword, and his body almost fell. After waking up from his selfless state, Yi Chen saw more than 10 swords with sharp sword lights stabbing towards him. No matter how he dodged or blocked, he couldn't avoid this assassination. Although the sword domain could slightly distort the opponent's sword trajectory, at least half of the swords would still land on his body. The outcome was already decided. Yi Chen's eyes were very calm. This didn't mean that he had a way to deal with it. His powerful soul allowed him to maintain absolute focus no matter what. Deviate a little more. Deviate a little more. The speed of the swords was very fast. Ordinary people wouldn't even have time to react. But in Yi Chen's perception, the swords stabbing towards him were getting slower and slower, showing signs of coming to a stop. An inconceivable scene occurred. All the swords really stopped, maintaining a distance of 3 feet from Yi Chen. Clang, clang, clang. In the next moment, the swords that had stopped stabbed forward again. However, the trajectories of the swords were greatly deviated. When the swords collided, resplendent sparks erupted. The sparks couldn't get close to Yi Chen. Their trajectories were distorted, and they erupted outwards. On the other hand, Yi Chen was like a sword god. No sword in his hand, but a sword in his heart. Third-level sword domain, completed. After losing a leg, Yi Chen couldn't move quickly. But it didn't matter. At this moment, there was no need for him to dodge. Before anyone's sword could stab him, he would stab them to death. Third-level sword domain represented a new realm. The core profundity was to have a sword in your heart and not have a sword in your hand. Having no sword in his hand meant that he had no weaknesses. Having a sword in his heart meant that he could always block his opponent's attack with his sword. Nothing could be faster than the speed of the heart. With a thought in his heart, the sword stabbed out. At this moment, his body and heart had completely fused together. Since a long time ago, Yi Chen had learned that there were 3 realms when it came to sword attacks. The first realm was called sword control with the body, the second was sword control with qi, and the third was sword control with intent. Body was the physical strength of the body. Everyone had this realm, but there weren't many who were proficient in it. Some people wasted a lot of energy, but their sword speed wasn't ideal. Some people could casually increase their sword speed to a frightening level. This was the gap in technique. It needed to be tempered hundreds and thousands of times in order to improve. Sword control with qi was much better than sword control with the body. Before the body moved, qi had already been released. This qi was the energy within a martial artist's body. Although many people had high cultivation, they might not have grasped the technique of sword control with qi. Gathering Jinyuan in the palm and then striking with the sword wasn't called sword control with qi. At most, it was just an enhanced version of sword control with the body. This was because the main idea of sword control with qi was to use qi as the main force, and the body as a support. Physical strength was used as a support. Under such circumstances, the sword would be much faster than others. Finally, sword control with intent. This intent was the will. Will was formless. It was precisely because it was formless that the sword speed could reach an unfathomable level. No one could block it. And the so-called sword control with intent was to use the heart to control the sword. A strong will was actually a strong heart. Will was formless, and the heart was also formless. Sword domain had reached the third layer. Yi Chen's sword realm had impressively reached sword control with intent. In other words, it was the highest realm of sword control with heart. When the sword pierced out, nothing could block it. Poo 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 poo. A horrifying scene occurred. No matter how fast the sword attacks of the sword artists were, no matter how ingenious they were, Yi Chen would always be able to kill them before they could. In fact, Yi Chen didn't even release his sword domain to the limit. It was because the sword artists of the 15th layer weren't worthy of him using his full strength. He only needed to use sword control with heart to deal with them. 1,000 sword artists were all dead. Yi Chen stood on the mountain peak. Sigh, let's wait a few more days. It's not a solution to keep waiting like this. If he wants to challenge the sword world for a year, won't I be waiting for a year in vain? In the outside world, some extremely patient people finally couldn't wait any longer. It wasn't that they didn't have patience. On the contrary, they were very patient. Otherwise, they wouldn't have waited until now. But first and foremost, they were sword artists. They needed to increase their strength in order to survive. Their time wasn't used to wait. They're right. Within 3 to 5 months, it'll be very difficult for Yi Chen to pass the 15th layer. He might not even be able to accomplish it in a year. I won't wait any longer. What's the point of waiting for a few more days? Everyone, farewell. As he spoke, one of the swordsmen stood up and was about to leave. However, he suddenly stopped. Look, the 16th layer. He has reached the 16th layer. This person pointed at the invisible barrier. His eyes were wide open and his face was filled with disbelief. The 16th layer? Everyone turned to look at him. It really is the 16th layer. This? Everyone looked at each other and held their breath. Impossible, the 17th layer. After around the time to drink a cup of tea, a new ancient character flickered on the invisible barrier, 17. Chapter 944. On the 15th floor, all the swordsmen were at the initial stage of the second layer. On the 16th floor, it was the intermediate stage of the second layer. On the 17th floor, it was the late stage of the second layer. If it was before, it would be difficult for him to deal with 3 to 5 swordsmen. After all, his sword domain was only at the peak stage of the second layer, which was only a small level away from the late stage of the second layer. He could easily suppress his opponents in a one-on-one fight, but it would be a little difficult for him to deal with 3 to 5 swordsmen at once. He could only rely on his superb swordsmanship to kill them, but it would also be a little dangerous for him. In fact, Yi Chen was a special case. If it was someone else who had just broken through to the third layer of the sword domain, they could at most reach the 15th floor. It would be impossible for them to reach the 16th floor. However, Yi Chen reached the 17th floor. This was an anomaly. Yi Chen knew that the reason he could reach the 17th floor was not because of the third layer of the sword domain, but because of the ability to control the sword with his heart. Reaching the third layer of the sword domain didn't necessarily mean that one would grasp the ability to control the sword with his heart. However, once one grasped the ability, the sword domain would definitely reach the third layer, or even the fourth layer. The two were related but not necessarily. By relying on the ability to control the sword with his heart, Yi Chen's close combat strength had increased by several times, and his overall strength had also increased by a level. Of course, the ability to control the sword with his heart didn't increase much in terms of offensive strength. If his offensive strength was high enough, there would be only a few 5-star battle prowess that could be a match for Yi Chen. On the 17th floor, Yi Chen's lost left leg had already recovered. Pushing the third layer of the sword domain to the limit, Yi Chen's figure moved like a god, and the sword in his hand stabbed out repeatedly without any warning. Every stab would inevitably cause a swordsman to fall to the ground. There was no sword, only heart-palpitating sword light. Yi Chen's killing intent was constantly increasing. If these swordsmen were living beings, then Yi Chen would have definitely killed tens of thousands of people in these 20 days. Every time he killed a person, Yi Chen's skill would increase by a bit. Up until now, Yi Chen's sword art was no longer just a sword art, it had risen to a kind of art of killing. However, the 17th level wasn't so easy to pass. Towards the end, crisscrossing sword scars appeared on Yi Chen's body. This was an extremely dangerous sign. Not to mention the slightest bit of carelessness, if he didn't maintain a state of surpassing his limits at all times, he would immediately be killed by the flurry of swords and expelled from the sword realm. Fortunately, after comprehending sword control with the heart, Yi Chen's mental state was surprisingly good. His mind was no longer so easily fatigued. Instead, the more he fought, the braver he became. 17th floor, passed. The 18th floor. In the outside world, the number 18 flashed on the invisible barrier. Those who saw this scene almost spurted out a mouthful of blood. Was there an end to this? Either he was stuck in the 15th floor for more than 20 days, or he suddenly advanced by leaps and bounds, rushing to the 18th floor. No one could endure such a huge stimulation. One must know that even the Azure Cloud Sword Emperor had only reached the 18th floor. Is it a ghost trying to break through the sword realm? Some people thought nervously. The 18th floor corresponded to the peak of the 3rd level of sword domain. For Yi Chen to be able to reach this floor, not to mention that no one would be able to do it in the future, it was almost unprecedented. However, the 18th floor and the 17th floor were completely different. Not to mention that the swordsman here had reached the peak of the 2nd level of sword domain, the swordsman's swordsmanship was forcibly raised to a higher level. From the 1st to the 17th floor, the power of the swordsman's swordsmanship was about the same. Even if there was an increase in power, it wouldn't be too ridiculous. But on the 18th floor, the swordsman's swordsmanship was unbelievably powerful. Every single one of them was a genius swordsman. Although Yi Chen was a genius, he couldn't resist the encirclement of so many genius swordsmen. After killing only 3 swordsmen, Yi Chen was killed. It wasn't that he wasn't strong enough, but that the 18th floor was too abnormal. Dozens of swordsmen had surrounded him, and even the heart-controlling sword ability couldn't stop them. Being able to kill 3 swordsmen was already commendable. Amazing! In the void, Yi Chen opened his eyes, his expression filled with amazement. The sword realm contained countless swordsmanship. Up until now, he hadn't seen many that repeated themselves. On the 18th floor, the first batch of swordsmen had all possessed powerful swordsmanship comparable to Marquis Sword Star's 7-star point killing sword art. It was to the extent that he couldn't exist for even a split second. In that split second, he could only kill 3 swordsmen before being killed. The sword realm was worthy of being the sacred land of Sky Sword Continent. Not to mention anything else, merely being able to experience countless swordsmanship was a great benefit. Yi Chen had only created 1 or 2 styles of vibrational sword arts, sky-shattering sword arts, and autumn water sword arts. Originally, if he wanted to create more, it would have been impossible without a few years. However, at this moment, Yi Chen had countless inspirations. Thousands of swordsmanship were playing out in his mind, each of them different, containing the lifelong effort and wisdom of the masters of these swordsmanship. Fortunately, my soul is powerful enough to hold so much information on swordsmanship. Yi Chen's soul was 10 times that of ordinary life and death kings, and the amount of information he could hold was also 10 times that of ordinary kings. Moreover, he had photographic memory. This photographic memory was not an ordinary kind of photographic memory. If memorizing a book was photographic memory, it would be the lowest grade of photographic memory. Any Sea of Soul realm martial artist could do it. Yi Chen's photographic memory allowed him to memorize thousands of swordsmanship in his mind and extract them at any time to deduce them. Of course, Yi Chen was not a god. He could deduce all the swordsmanship below the 10th layer, but the swordsmanship above the 10th layer contained more than just information. A glance was not enough. I'll deduce the swordsmanship below the 10th layer first. As for the swordsmanship above the 10th layer, there's still a long way to go. Yi Chen decided to leave. Biting off more than one could chew was a principle that everyone understood. However, only a few could do it. There were several thousand swordsmanship below the 10th layer, which was enough for Yi Chen to digest for a while. The incorporeal barrier rippled, and the blue-robed Yi Chen walked out. Yi Chen. It's Yi Chen. Everyone stood up with fiery expressions. If they were somewhat unconvinced of Yi Chen before, thinking that the rumors were exaggerated, then right now, they only had admiration. How many people could pass through the 18th layer of the Sword Realm? Azure Sky Sword Emperor was the only one, and now Yi Chen was added to the mix. If they were unconvinced, then what else could they be convinced of? If they couldn't even acknowledge someone else's talent, then they weren't fit to be a sword artist. Yi Chen didn't expect that his appearance would cause such a huge commotion. Yi Chen, you're not going to continue? A sword artist mustered his courage and asked. Yi Chen smiled, not anymore. I'm going back to digest. Yi Chen, I wonder if you're taking disciples. My son is 13 years old this year, and his talent is amazing. If he can become your disciple, it would be his fortune. Seeing that Yi Chen wasn't as cold as before, a middle-aged sword artist said with a face full of hope. Yi Chen, I also have a grandson. My granddaughter. For a moment, everyone recommended their juniors to Yi Chen. If they could become the disciple of a peerless sword Dao genius like Yi Chen, one in 10,000 years, their future accomplishments could be easily imagined. For Yi Chen to be so powerful at such a young age, he must have a unique path of development. Yi Chen's thoughts flickered. He had never thought of taking disciples before, because he didn't even have enough time. How could he teach disciples? It would be good enough if he didn't mislead them. But now, it was necessary for him to take disciples. A powerful master was only one person, but a powerful disciple was many people. The Yi family couldn't be guarded by him alone. It was not that he didn't have confidence in the Yi family, but with the resources of the Yi family, it would be hard for them to produce a life and death king. Although his brother Yi Xian had great talent, becoming a life and death king was still as hard as ascending the heavens. Otherwise, if any genius with great talent could become a life and death king, life and death kings would be everywhere. Apart from this, Yi Chen also had the thought of unifying the sections. Yi family, Sky Cloud Martial School, and Eternal Sky Martial School all needed his care. If it was feasible, he would combine these three forces and form a Sword Dao sect. Of course, whether it was feasible or not, he would have to go back and discuss it. If it really didn't work, then he would think about it again. Everyone, taking disciples is not a business. If you all have sincerity, you can find me at the Yi family of South Rudra region. I, Yi Chen, will never accept disciples who only look impressive. You all should be prepared for this. However, if your talent is not bad, you can also become an attendant of my Yi family. When I have time, I will also impart my experience and sword arts to them. Yi Chen's words were watertight and full of sincerity. True Spirit Continent South Rudra region Yi family. All right, I will bring my grandson there next month. At worst, I will spend a lot of spirit stones and use the conveyor gate. From True Spirit Continent to Sky Sword Continent, there were a few conveyor gates in operation. However, the cost would be too high, and ordinary people wouldn't be able to afford it. But there was no need to teleport from Sky Sword Continent to True Spirit Continent at once. One could teleport a bit at a time. Between the two continents, there were also many islands with conveyor gates. All right, Yi Chen will take his leave first. Everyone, I hope to see you again. After saying these words, Yi Chen's figure flickered and directly entered the void, disappearing in the blink of an eye. On this day, the news of Yi Chen reaching the 18th layer of Sword Realm spread out at a frightening speed. On this day, the news of Yi Chen's willingness to accept a disciple also spread out along with the former, causing a huge impact on the Sky Sword Continent. Everything had its pros and cons. Yi Chen's actions made all the Sword Kings of Sky Sword Continent extremely unhappy. Someone from their own continent running off to another continent to find a master? What was this? This was Sky Sword Continent, not something True Spirit Continent could compare to. Yi Chen immediately became a thorn in the eyes of all the Sword Kings of Sky Sword Continent. In the void, Yi Chen was shuttling back and forth. Sword Domain has broken through to the 3rd layer, and its might has increased greatly. However, the consumption of Zhenyuan is also enormous. My cultivation base is still a bit low. Blackwater Alliance, it's time for you to bleed. Without returning to Yi family, Yi Chen streaked across the sky of True Spirit Continent, flying in the direction of Blackwater Alliance. Chapter 945. Blackwater Alliance was a superpower in the Southern Ocean. This alliance gathered many sects and families, with more than 20 life and death kings and nearly 10 half-step kings. Although ordinary 5th grade sects had life and death kings, they might not necessarily have half-step kings. It was clear that Blackwater Alliance not only had many top experts, but also many lower-level ones. The headquarters of Blackwater Alliance was a huge black island. There were more than 20 palaces on the island, and at the center of the island were 4 main palaces. In one of the main palaces, Sky King's brows creased. "You're saying that your leader wants to increase the distribution of genuine crystals?" Sky King looked down at the chaotic demon ocean emissary. This chaos demon sea emissary was a demonic human king. He raised his head and spoke in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. "The Blackwater Alliance occupies a treasure land like the Devouring Island. Every year, they produce 20 to 30 million genuine crystals, but only 3 million is a bit too little for my chaos demon sea. My patriarch said that every year, she wants 6 million, not one less." The Sky King said with a serious face, "The Devouring Island produces 20 to 30 million genuine crystals every year, but our Blackwater Alliance can only keep 10 million of them. The rest have been distributed to the Life and Death Realm warriors who know about it. We have more than 20 Life and Death Realm warriors, so if we split it evenly, each of us would not get more than 500,000 genuine crystals. Besides that, our Blackwater Alliance still has to use millions of genuine crystals to attract more warriors. If we don't do that, then the genuine crystal production will decrease. In this way, it would be good enough for each of us to get 300,000 genuine crystals." Although Sky King said this, the Blackwater Alliance's genuine crystals every year were definitely more than 10 million. Moreover, the Blackwater Alliance still had a large amount of genuine crystals in storage. After all, the Devouring Island had existed for many years. Accumulating a bit every year, the amount of genuine crystals accumulated would be astonishing. Of course, this storage was only for emergencies and couldn't be used easily. The chaotic demon sea emissary said with a solemn expression, "Then, why did you give Old Redwater 5 million true essence crystals? My patriarch is a titled monarch, but he only gave 3 million. Is your Blackwater Alliance looking down on my patriarch and my chaotic demon sea's demonic human clan? Where did you hear this?" The Heavenly King's eyes flickered several times. Redwater Old Monster was a titled monarch, and just like the Demon Flower Emperor, he knew about the Devouring Island. In order to seal their mouths, the Blackwater Alliance had to send out a large number of genuine crystals every year. The Demon Flower Emperor received 3 million, while the Redwater Old Monster received 5 million. The reason why the Redwater Old Monster received more was that he had agreed to be the backing of the Blackwater Alliance. Originally, they had been living in harmony, but they did not know how the Demon Flower Emperor knew the specific number of genuine crystals they had given to the Redwater Old Monster. Could it be the Redwater Old Monster? Not likely. Redwater Old Monster had no need to show off in front of the Demon Flower Emperor. He could just be happy in secret, who would be stupid enough to tell others about his wealth. If you don't want people to know, don't do it. The Chaos Demon Sea Emissary sneered. Sky King was furious in his heart, but he did not show it on his face, and said expressionlessly, "This matter needs to be discussed in detail, but adding 3 million is too much. Go back and tell your patriarch at most add 2 million, just like the Redwater Old Monster, 3 million. All right, you can go back and report. Forgive me for not seeing you off. The next one to come will be my patriarch." The Chaos Demon Sea Emissary did not linger, and walked out of the main palace, soaring into the void, and rushing towards the Chaos Demon Sea. But as soon as the Chaos Demon Sea Emissary left, Sky King coldly snorted and smashed the armrest with a palm strike. Preposterous. Demon Flower Emperor, don't be too happy just yet. Although my Blackwater Alliance is not as powerful as your Chaos Demon Sea, we can make friends with titled monarchs. South Sea Demon God Cult Leader, South Sea Black Fiend Island Leader, and South Sea Alliance Leader. These 3 are already cooperating with my Blackwater Alliance. Adding Redwater Old Monster, and my Blackwater Old Ancestor who has just broken through, we have a total of 5 titled monarchs. No matter how powerful you are, you won't be able to resist. At that time, You won't even get a single Zhenyuan crystal. Yin Sky King hated the Demon Flower Emperor so much not only because of the Demon Flower Emperor's high demands, but also because he knew that the Demon Flower Emperor and Xianhou had attacked Terminator Demon Sect. Yi Chen had embezzled more than 2 million Zhenyuan crystals from the Blackwater Alliance. Yin Sky King had always wanted to kill him, but had always failed. Later on, when he planned to personally take action, Yi Chen had already entered life and death realm, and his battle strength was even higher than his. As for the Blackwater Alliance's cooperation with the South Sea Demon God Cult Leader, South Sea Black Fiend Island Leader, and South Sea Alliance Leader, it was not because they had too many Zhenyuan crystals, but because the great calamity of the foreign races was imminent. All the monarchs in Elysium were thinking of ways to increase their strength and preserve themselves. As for the Blackwater Alliance's cooperation with the South Sea Demon God Cult Leader, South Sea Black Fiend Island Leader, and South Sea Alliance Leader, it was not because they had too many Zhenyuan crystals, but because the great calamity of the foreign races was imminent. All the monarchs in Elysium were thinking of ways to increase their strength and preserve themselves. Of course, the Blackwater Alliance's annual production of Zhenyuan crystals was limited. Cooperating with 3 monarchs at once would be very strenuous for the Blackwater Alliance. Therefore, they had already decided to kick out the Demon Flower Emperor and divide the Zhenyuan crystals of the Demon Flower Emperor to the 3 monarchs. This way, things would be a bit easier. Of course, the Devouring Island's annual production of Zhenyuan crystals was limited. Cooperating with 3 monarchs at once would be very strenuous for the Blackwater Alliance. Therefore, they had already decided to kick out the Demon Flower Emperor and divide the Zhenyuan crystals of the Demon Flower Emperor to the 3 monarchs. This way, things would be a bit easier. Meanwhile, the Yin Sky King and the Chaotic Demon Ocean Emissary's proposal of adding 2 million Zhenyuan crystals was only a delaying tactic. After all, it was still not the right time to turn against the Demon Flower Emperor. They would have to wait until the time was right. Yi Chen, you have the Demon Flower Emperor and Xianhou to protect you, but my Blackwater Alliance has 5 monarchs. Sooner or later, I'll make you spit out everything you've eaten. Yin Sky King sneered. On his way, Yi Chen stopped a random Sea of Soul Realm expert and found out where the headquarters of the Blackwater Alliance was located. On the second day, Yi Chen arrived in the sky above the huge Black Island. On this huge Black Island, there were more than 20 palaces, with 4 main palaces in the center. In the sky above the island, there were several kinds of great arrays. Among them, there was one that Yi Chen could recognize at a glance, because it was the Water and Earth Interlocking Great Array. Being able to occupy a treasure land like the Devouring Island. I can't look down on them indeed. Whether a force was powerful or not could be seen from the arrays. Who dares to come to my Blackwater Alliance? Yi Chen's arrival was open and aboveboard. On the island, a figure soared into the sky. It was a life and death king that Yi Chen had never seen before. I'm Yi Chen, and I have something to discuss with the leader of your Blackwater Alliance. Yi Chen was not a bandit, so it was impossible for him to rob the moment he arrived. Moreover, he had no idea where the Blackwater Alliance's Zhenyuan crystal storage was. Our leader has gone on a long journey, but the deputy leader, Yin Sky King, is here. I'll go inform him. Blackwater Alliance had no enmity with Yi Chen. At most, they had tricked him into the Devouring Island. The only one who had enmity with Yi Chen was Yin Sky King. Of course, Yi Chen still didn't know that Yin Sky King had been sending people to kill him. Upon hearing Yi Chen's name, this life and death king was greatly astonished. Yi Chen having the strength of a peak king was no longer news. Moreover, he was proficient in the space profound. Even the Black Dragon Old Ancestor couldn't do anything to him. Since the other party had come to pay a visit, he couldn't possibly refuse. Otherwise, if the other party got angry, he might not be able to bear the consequences, which would be bad for him. All right. Yi Chen wasn't in a hurry. Not long after, 2 people flew over. One of them was Yin Sky King. Yin Sky King didn't reveal anything on his face. He only acted as if this was his first time dealing with Yi Chen. He smiled faintly and said, I've long heard of your great name. Now that I've seen you, you truly live up to your reputation. Yi Chen didn't waste any time and said, Blackwater Alliance, you should be able to make decisions, right? Sky King stared blankly for a moment. I can make decisions for most things. All right, your Blackwater Alliance will provide me with 3 million Yuan crystals every year. Treat it as a fee to keep your mouth shut. Yichen went straight to the point. These words immediately petrified the other two. Sky King yelled inwardly, Yichen, you're going too far. I didn't ask you for Yuan crystals, but you're asking for an exorbitant price. Truly infuriating. Concealing his emotions well, Sky King said awkwardly, I can't make the decision on this matter. I'll have to wait for Alliance leader to return. How about this, you stay on a nearby island for now. Alliance leader will be back soon. Sky King had a sinister plan. This time, Alliance leader Blackwater Old Ancestor had gone on a long journey to invite South Shallow Sea Alliance's Alliance leader. He would return at a later date, so he would have Yichen wait and walk right into the trap. With Blackwater Old Ancestor and South Shallow Sea Alliance leader strength, Yichen wouldn't be able to escape even if he grew wings. However, before that, he had to make Yichen stay willingly. Such an opportunity was extremely rare. When will your Alliance leader return? Yichen asked. Tomorrow at the latest. Sky King answered. In that case, I'll stay here for now. Yichen didn't waste time with the other party. Around the huge Black Island, there were some buildings built on some islands. Yichen directly found an uninhabited island and flew over. He would come back tomorrow to collect the Yuan crystals. At that time, Blackwater Alliance would have no choice but to pay up. Previously, he had been tricked into devouring island and chased several times. How could this debt be settled so easily? 3 million a year was very fair. Watching Yichen choose an island to stay on, Sky King's expression was incomparably cold. Yichen, even if you don't die tomorrow, you'll lose a layer of skin. If you want to blame something, blame yourself for being too greedy. Let's go back. Sky King returned to his main palace. Chapter 946. One day passed quickly. At noon of the second day, under the blazing sun, two figures shattered the space and appeared outside the great array of the Black Island. The black-robed old man on the left waved his right hand, and a door immediately appeared in the great array. The two figures flew through the door and into the main palace at the center of the island. Vice Alliance leader is back. In the main palace, a person came to inform Sky King. I already know. Although Sky King didn't release his soul power at all times, if he didn't know that 2 life and death kings had arrived on the island and opened the great array, he would have lived in vain. Alliance leader made a breakthrough a few days ago, and his battle strength increased from 4-star tyrant to 5-star, becoming a titled monarch. No matter how powerful Yichen is, he's only a peak king with 4-star battle strength. Even a 4-star tyrant is not Alliance leader's opponent. In the past, the reason why Blackwater Alliance used a large amount of Yuan crystals to block life and death kings with battle strength below 5-star was because they didn't have the strength to challenge them. Now that Yichen has come to ask for hush money, he's courting death. As one of the big shots of Blackwater Alliance, Sky King naturally knew a bit about Blackwater Ancestor's character. Standing up, the Heavenly King's figure flashed, and he left his main palace hall. He walked towards the core main palace hall that was surrounded by the other 3 main palaces. His footsteps were swift. Inside the core palace, a black-robed old man was drinking tea with a yellow-robed old man, talking cheerfully and wittily. Brother Huang, you don't know. Although my Blackwater Alliance is also an overlord of the southern deep ocean, the devouring island is too tempting. It's a fat piece of meat that everyone wants a bite of. I'm glorious in front of others, but bitter in the back. The black-robed old man wasn't tall, but he gave off an imposing aura. He was precisely the leader of Blackwater Alliance, Blackwater Ancestor. In front of him, a yellow-robed old man said with a smile that was yet not a smile, Old geezer, you're not only planning to cooperate with me, but also with Demon God Cult and Black Fiend Island. If you succeed with the influence of our 4 great powers, who would dare to touch your Blackwater Alliance? This, I was just about to tell you. The yellow-haired old man was not a normal life and death realm warrior, but the leader of the South Shallow Sea Alliance, the yellow-robed old monster. His strength was earth-shattering and was rumored to be at mid-5-star level. The demon god cult and the Black Evil Island had always been the sworn enemies of the South Shallow Sea Alliance. They had battled for many years, and both sides had suffered quite a bit. He was still a bit nervous about joining hands with the other three, afraid that the three would leave on bad terms and vent their anger on him. However, judging from the expression of the yellow-robed old monster, he did not seem to mind at all. "I don't care who you work with, but my share of the profits can't be reduced." The yellow-robed eccentric rapped the table. "Of course. Brother Huang, what kind of person do you take me for?" The Blackwater ancestor hurriedly poured wine for the yellow-robed old monster. The yellow-robed old monster drank quite comfortably. Just by working with the Blackwater Alliance, he would be able to obtain a huge amount of Zhenyuan crystals every year, so why not? Moreover, he had a vague premonition that the future of Elysium would be full of calamities. They could no longer fight against the demon god cult and the Black Evil Island, and had to save their strength to protect themselves. Working with the three great powers was naturally the best thing to do. Of course, it was impossible for him to go to the demon god cult and the Black Evil Island. The Blackwater Alliance would be the perfect middleman. "Leader." Right at this moment, the Een Sky King's voice was heard outside the palace. "Oh, it's the Een Sky King. What's the matter? Come in first." The Een Sky King was one of the right-hand men of the Blackwater ancestor and was highly regarded. The Een Sky King walked in. Seeing the yellow-robed old monster, he immediately cupped his fists and said, "Ah, so it's the leader of the South Shallow Sea Alliance. Een Sky King greets you." The yellow-robed old monster waved his hand and smiled. "We'll all be on the same side in the future. No need to be so polite." "Een Sky King, what's the matter?" the Blackwater ancestor asked. The Een Sky King didn't turn his back on the yellow-robed old monster and transmitted his voice. "Yesterday, an emissary from the Chaos Demonic Ocean came. The Demon Flower Emperor said that she wants us to provide her with 6 million true essence crystals every year, not one less. Otherwise, she will personally come to talk to you." The Een Sky King didn't immediately talk about Yi Chen's matter. Instead, she talked about the Demon Flower Emperor's request. Hearing this, the Blackwater ancestor's face instantly darkened. "She really said that? Preposterous." The Blackwater ancestor shouted in a low voice. Hearing the words Demon Flower Emperor, the yellow-robed old monster raised his eyebrows. This demoness was very famous in Elysium. Let alone the Blackwater Alliance, even he didn't dare to provoke her. However, the present was different from the past. Having gathered the 4 major forces, their strength was already above the Chaos Demonic Ocean. The Chaos Demonic Ocean isn't a big deal. With our strength, do we still need to be afraid of her? The 4 major forces cooperated, and the true essence crystals were divided according to the ratio. The Demon Flower Emperor wanted 6 million true essence crystals, so everyone's share was less. The yellow-robed old monster naturally didn't want his true essence crystals to be less. For his own benefit, he had to fight this demoness. "How did you answer?" the Blackwater ancestor asked again. The Een Sky King said, "The Chaos Demonic Ocean emissary came in a threatening manner. I couldn't directly refuse, so I used a delaying tactic and said at most 2 million. "That's very good." The Blackwater ancestor was more and more satisfied with the Een Sky King. Although with their current strength, they didn't need to be afraid of the Demon Flower Emperor, they couldn't just fall out with her and take things to the extreme. What else? Seeing that the Een Sky King seemed to have something else to say, the Blackwater ancestor asked curiously. The Een Sky King paused for a moment and said solemnly, "Yi Chen is here. He asked us for 3 million true essence crystals as hush money every year." The core palace was silent for a moment. The silence didn't last long. The next moment, the Blackwater ancestor's angry voice sounded, simply arrogant and conceited. "Does he really think that my Blackwater Alliance is a soft persimmon that they can bully as they please? If we give it to him today, who will come tomorrow? Do I have to give it to him as well? Yi Chen, what a good Yi Chen. I don't care if you are a genius or not. Where is he?" The Blackwater ancestor's aura soared into the sky. On an island near the Blackwater Island, the Sky King was secretly happy. Blackwater, don't be too excited. Maybe I can handle this matter. Suddenly, the yellow-robed old monster said, "You can handle it?" The Blackwater ancestor looked at the yellow-robed old monster. The yellow-robed old monster said confidently, "This Yi Chen has friendly relations with the Water Ape clan of my Southern Shallow Sea Alliance. As the alliance leader, the life and death of the Water Ape clan is in my hands. I believe that after Yi Chen knows my identity, he will restrain himself. At that time, you can just give him 1,000,000 true essence crystals and send him away. Every year." The yellow-robed old monster's words made the Blackwater ancestor take it seriously. Hee, one time is enough? All right. Although 1,000,000 true essence crystals was not a small amount, the Blackwater ancestor didn't put it in his eyes at all. This time, when cooperating with the four factions, he was prepared to kick out some life and death kings who knew about it. In this way, 1,000,000 true essence crystals was nothing. "Come, take me there." The Blackwater ancestor and the other two stood up and flew into the sky. The island where Yi Chen was resting was thousands of li away from the Blackwater Island. In an instant, the three arrived. In the building on the island, Yi Chen opened his eyes, revealing a trace of surprise. "Let's see what tricks they're playing." Yi Chen flew out. "You are Yi Chen." In the sky, the Blackwater ancestor said expressionlessly. Yi Chen glanced at the yellow-robed old monster and said, "You should know what I said yesterday. What do you think?" The Blackwater ancestor didn't reply. The yellow-robed old monster walked out with a smile. "Yi Chen, congratulations on reaching life and death realm. I couldn't go to the banquet that day, and I'm deeply regretful. However, Sun Tai is a member of my South Shallow Sea Alliance. With him there, it can be considered as representing my alliance. Alliance leader Huang, Yi Chen has long heard of your name." Yi Chen knew that this person was the leader of the South Shallow Sea Alliance, a giant of Elysium, the yellow-robed old monster. The yellow-robed old monster laughed. "It's nothing more than an empty reputation." Yi Chen faintly sensed that the yellow-robed old monster was trying to persuade him, so he went straight to the point and said to the Blackwater ancestor, 3,000,000 true essence crystals a year. This is my bottom line. Back then, I was tricked into the Devouring Island and was chased several times. If not for my tricks, I would have been killed long ago. Yi Chen, we're all on the same side. There's no need to make things unpleasant. Brother Blackwater, how about this? You give Yi Chen 3,000,000 true essence crystals in one go, and we'll settle the grudge between us." The yellow-robed old monster changed his mind at the last moment, changing the 1,000,000 true essence crystals to 3,000,000. The main reason was that he didn't think Yi Chen was that easy to fool. Although the Blackwater ancestor didn't know why the yellow-robed old monster added 2,000,000 at the last moment, it was not like he couldn't accept it at one go. He said indifferently, "Yi Chen, I'll give Brother Huang some face and give you 3,000,000 true essence crystals. Don't come here anymore." A faint smile appeared on Yi Chen's face. "What? You're not satisfied?" The Blackwater ancestor was angered. "Once is fine, but I want 15,000,000 true essence crystals. In the future, I promise not to come here again." Between 3,000,000 a year and 15,000,000 a year, Yi Chen would rather choose the latter. "In your dreams." Yi Chen. Not only was the Blackwater ancestor enraged, but the yellow-robed old monster also lost some face. With his status and strength, speaking to Yi Chen like this was already praising him. Not only did the latter not appreciate it, he even demanded an exorbitant price. It was clear that Yi Chen didn't put him in his eyes. 3,000,000 a year or 15,000,000 a year, it's up to you. On the other hand, I want to settle the previous debt with you. The Devouring Island was only occupied by the Blackwater Alliance. The Blackwater Alliance and the Devouring Island's Holy Spirit were merely cooperating, tricking a large number of martial artists to enter the island. If the Devouring Island originally belonged to the Blackwater Alliance, it wouldn't be a scourge. Yi Chen's visit this time was morally unjustified. But now, he needed a share of the profits. Using an analogy, Yi Chen's current actions were like robbing those evil people. Chapter 947. Yi Chen, don't make a mistake. This is not a place for you to act presumptuously. Leave now, or you'll have to bear the consequences. The yellow-robed old monster shouted with a gloomy face. He was already furious. Since Yi Chen was shameless, there was no need for him to give him any face. Brother Huang, you don't have to care about this matter. A mere genius who just entered life and death realm dares to be so arrogant and come to my Blackwater Alliance. He's simply asking to be humiliated. That's fine. I, Blackwater Ancestor, will use this opportunity to reveal some of my strength and wake up those fellows who are eyeing me up. There were many people staring at the devouring island, and Blackwater Ancestor felt that it was time to intimidate them. Hearing this, the yellow-robed old monster knew that Blackwater Ancestor was truly angry. Although he was afraid of Demon Flower Emperor and Xianhou, he wouldn't really kill Yi Chen. However, he wouldn't let Yi Chen have it easy either. Yi Chen would inevitably suffer heavy injuries, and his cultivation base would be greatly damaged. Blackwater Ancestor's heavy water true thunder art was quite famous in the southern deep sea. Once the heavy water true thunder was unleashed, nothing could stop it. As Blackwater Ancestor's body emitted a frightening aura, the yellow-robed old monster and Yin Sky King retreated, giving the two a space to fight. You want to fight? Fine, I'll accompany you. Yi Chen's expression also turned cold. He didn't plan to return empty-handed. Since the other party didn't want to bleed, he would make them bleed a lot. Whatever means you have, use them all. Yi Chen looked at Blackwater Ancestor calmly. Courting death. Blackwater Ancestor's black hair fluttered in the wind, and his body was surrounded by a crystalline black water flow. This water flow weighed more than 1,000 caddies, and each drop seemed to be condensed from a pool of water. Within the black water flow, there were even black thunderbolts. If an ordinary person looked at it, they would tremble in fear. Tearing apart the space, Blackwater Ancestor turned into a beam of black light and slapped at Yi Chen. No one knew how Yi Chen pulled out his sword. In the void, a blurry sword light instantly appeared in front of Blackwater Ancestor and greeted him. Rumble! With a thunderous explosion, Patriarch Blackwater's palm strike seemed to contain countless bolts of lightning. Anyone who came into contact with his palm strike would immediately be blasted away. The weaker ones would be blasted to death and reduced to ashes. This was mainly because Patriarch Blackwater's water profundity had reached perfection. Furthermore, he had cultivated an ancient palm technique, the heavy water true thunder art. The first step of cultivating the heavy water true thunder art was to perfect the water profundity. Then he would condense water to produce heavy water. Following that, he would use water lightning to form the heavy water true thunder. The heavy water true thunder was extremely terrifying. It was much more powerful than ordinary water and lightning fusion profundities. However, the sword art that Yi Chen used wasn't weak either. It was the second move of the vibrational sword art, Heaven-Inflicted Sword. The Heaven-Inflicted Sword contained an unimaginable vibrational power that could scatter any object. When Patriarch Blackwater's heavy water true thunder encountered the Heaven-Inflicted Sword, he didn't have time to condense the power to the limit and erupted prematurely. A terrifying shockwave spread out wantonly with the two of them at the center. Billions of tons of seawater were directly sent flying into the sky by the shockwave, causing a storm that was countless times heavier than a torrential downpour. The surrounding islands were instantly annihilated. Not even a bit of debris could be found. The boundless seawater rushed to Blackwater Island that was thousands of miles away. If it wasn't for the protection of the array, Blackwater Island would have been obliterated. A battle between powerful monarchs had always been a devastating disaster. As the palm and sword clashed, both of them retreated. Patriarch Blackwater retreated 3 steps. Yi Chen retreated more than 10 steps. In their first exchange, Yi Chen was at a disadvantage. 4-star Overlord combat power. The yellow-robed old freak was very clear that Patriarch Blackwater hadn't used his full strength. His first palm wasn't his strongest move, so the combat power he revealed was only that of a 4-star Overlord. Although Yi Chen was at a disadvantage, the difference wasn't huge. He should also have the combat power of a 4-star Overlord. After all, there was a small difference between 4-star Overlord and 4-star Overlord. It was impossible for their combat power to be exactly the same. What a powerful palm force! Yi Chen's blood boiled. Patriarch Blackwater's palm strike was like a thunderbolt. Even the heaven-inflicted sword wasn't able to completely dissipate it. It could only detonate it prematurely. However, Yi Chen felt that this result was reasonable. Since Patriarch Blackwater could become the leader of the Blackwater Alliance, he definitely had some ability. His combat power had most likely reached the 5-star Overlord level. That palm strike just now probably wasn't his true strength. 4-star Overlord combat power. No wonder he's so arrogant. Patriarch Blackwater was a little surprised. According to the rumors, Yi Chen's combat power was at most an advanced 4-star. It wouldn't exceed the peak of 4-star. However, that sword strike just now clearly had the combat power of a 4-star Overlord. Otherwise, he wouldn't have only taken 10 steps back. Take another Mystic Water Thunderbolt Palm. The Heavy Water True Thunder art was a combination of a mental cultivation technique and a palm technique. It contained many palm techniques, and each palm strike contained immense power. This Mystic Water Thunderbolt Palm was several times more terrifying than the previous palm strike. It instantly pushed Patriarch Blackwater's combat power to the 5-star level. With a palm strike, the water and lightning kept compressing, condensing into a glass-sized azure pearl in the center of his palm. It's useless no matter how powerful the palm technique is. Yi Chen used his heart sword manipulation ability and stabbed out thousands of swords in one breath. The overlapping sword shadows enveloped Patriarch Blackwater. He didn't even have time to release the power of his palm technique towards Yi Chen. Pitter-patter. Condensed water and lightning sparks splashed on Patriarch Blackwater's protective Zhenyuan. This was the result of Yi Chen's sword energy hitting the protective Zhenyuan. With a puff, a few of the sword energies actually penetrated the protective Zhenyuan and exploded on Patriarch Blackwater's chest, abdomen, and ribs. Even his bones were exposed. What kind of sword art is this? How can it be so fast? Patriarch Blackwater was shocked and retreated continuously. He had a feeling that if he forcefully fought with Yi Chen, he would suffer even more attacks. Yi Chen's sword had already surpassed the normal speed. It even blinded his senses, making it impossible for him to know when Yi Chen would attack and from which angle. Not only was Patriarch Blackwater shocked, but Yin Sky King and the yellow-robed old freak were also shocked. Yin Sky King originally thought that the battle between Patriarch Blackwater and Yi Chen would definitely end with Patriarch Blackwater heavily injuring Yi Chen. It was impossible for the second situation to occur. However, Yi Chen was simply a freak. Although he was slightly inferior in the first exchange, the second time, he immediately reversed the situation and even made Patriarch Blackwater suffer some losses. The yellow-robed old freak's eyesight was much better than Yin Sky King's. He was shocked. Azure Cloud Sword Emperor's Azure Cloud Sword art was said to be unpredictable and untraceable, but it still wasn't as fast as Yi Chen. What kind of sword art did Yi Chen cultivate? It actually made Patriarch Blackwater unable to use his ultimate move. Even he himself couldn't do this. His ultimate move had already been prepared, and he had no choice but to use it. Patriarch Blackwater had no choice but to slap at Yi Chen from a very far distance. That blue pearl instantly transformed into countless thunderbolts, interweaving into a thunderstorm that swept toward Yi Chen. 3 to 5 ordinary Peak Kings would be annihilated. Unfortunately, the profound water thunderbolt palm could only display its strongest power at close range. Although it was still powerful from a distance, how could it deal with Yi Chen? The Sky Scorpio sword casually slashed twice, and the thunderstorm was torn apart. Yi Chen dashed out from within and slashed at Patriarch Blackwater. This sword surpassed space, and distance seemed to not exist. It instantly slashed at Patriarch Blackwater's body, and the latter's protective Zhenyuan didn't have the slightest effect. Orbital Kill Secret Sword. The second style of the heaven-shattering sword art was completely used for the first time in battle. Patriarch Blackwater's clothes exploded, revealing a set of black battle armor covered in scales. When the sword chi slashed at it, it instantly triggered a resistance from the battle armor. The black crystalline light constantly negated the might of the sword chi, but Patriarch Blackwater was not a battle armor but a life of flesh and blood. How could he withstand the clash between the battle armor and the sword chi? He vomited a mouthful of blood as he flew back more than 100 kilometers, staggering. Extreme grade battle armor. Yi Chen could naturally see that Patriarch Blackwater's armor was extraordinary. Ordinary half-step extreme grade or even pseudo-extreme grade battle armor wouldn't be able to block this sword. Only an extreme grade battle armor could counteract the majority of the sword's might. As soon as the orbital kill was used, Yi Chen's battle power instantly rose to 5 stars. Moreover, Patriarch Blackwater's battle power was clearly below Yi Chen's. If Patriarch Blackwater's battle power was low-grade 5 stars, then Yi Chen's battle power was peak low-grade 5 stars, close to mid-grade 5 stars. Patriarch Blackwater, I've said it before. 3 million Zhenyuan crystals a year, or 15 million in one go. Since you don't want to choose either, I'll have your Blackwater Alliance bleed a lot. I want all the Zhenyuan crystals. Yi Chen wasn't a pushover. He made up his mind and decided to loot a lot. He was different from other life and death kings. His mental state and spirit body were both extremely high. Moreover, Green Lotus Sword Arts had long since become a heaven-grade martial art. Adding on his powerful soul power and sword domain, he could bear even more cultivation base. There was no such thing as saturation. Perhaps he could gain 2,000 years of cultivation base in one go. Of course, Blackwater Alliance couldn't possibly have so many Zhenyuan crystals to increase his cultivation base. After all, Blackwater Alliance's Zhenyuan crystals were quasi-low grade, and their effects were 5 times weaker. Yi Chen, do you think you've got me? My heavy water true thunder arts haven't even been completely used yet. I'll show you the might of an ancient martial art, heavy water true thunder arts. Patriarch Blackwater's face was pale, and blood dripped down from the corner of his mouth. He sneered disdainfully and rapidly formed seals with both hands. In the next moment, outside his supreme grade battle armor, clumps of water and thunder fused together, forming a dark blue illusory battle armor. This illusory battle armor contained a frightening amount of energy, seemingly stronger than ordinary supreme grade battle armors. Patriarch Blackwater's aura also rose several times because of this illusory battle armor. Evidently, this illusory battle armor could increase Patriarch Blackwater's strength, allowing him to display even greater battle power. Rip. Tearing open the void, Patriarch Blackwater charged at Yi Chen at a speed that was 50% faster than before. He struck out with his Mystic Water Thunderbolt palm once again. Yi Chen had the ability to control his sword with his heart. With his heart, the sword moved. Immediately, the illusory battle armor on Patriarch Blackwater's body erupted with thousands of sparks. One of the invisible sword chi was especially sharp. It followed a certain trajectory and actually sliced open the illusory battle armor. However, the invisible sword chi's might was reduced by more than half. It was unable to injure Patriarch Blackwater through the supreme grade battle armor. Patriarch Blackwater, who had 2 layers of defense, was probably second only to the Nirvana Demon Emperor among all the titled monarchs that Yi Chen had seen. Of course, this was because Yi Chen had never seen the means of other titled monarchs. Finally approaching Yi Chen, Patriarch Blackwater struck out with his palm. Patriarch Blackwater, it's too early for you to be happy. Yi Chen's body trembled as he released his 3rd layer sword domain. The shattered space, the leaking spatial force, and the chaotic forces all came to a halt under the suppression of the sword domain. Patriarch Blackwater's speed was originally very fast, but once he was enveloped by the powerful sword domain, his speed slowed down by more than 10 times. In Yi Chen's eyes, he was like a turtle crawling. He was so slow that it made one's hair stand on end. Chapter 948. That's the 3rd sword domain. Not good, Brother Blackwater is in danger. The yellow-robed old man's eyes almost popped out. He had never imagined that Yi Chen's sword domain would break through to the 3rd sword domain. He was very clear about how terrifying the 3rd sword domain was. He remembered that 10 years ago, he had personally witnessed 3 titled monarchs ganging up on the Azure Sky Sword Emperor in a king-grade forbidden ground in the starry sky. Among these 3 titled monarchs, one was a high-grade 5-star monarch while the other 2 were mid-grade 5-star monarchs. When they joined forces, They could practically walk unhindered among 5-star titled monarchs. However, the Azure Sky Sword Emperor was even more tyrannical. With his third sword domain, he was actually able to suppress them. In the end, the battle ended on a sour note. In the eyes of the yellow-robed old man, the third sword domain had all sorts of terrifying aspects. Firstly, it could produce an unparalleled sword pressure on the opponent. Secondly, it could seal the space, making it unbreakable. Thirdly, it could multiply the speed of the person who released the sword domain, increasing the might of his sword art. It was so powerful that it could strike fear in the hearts of others. Although there were some titled monarchs as powerful as the Azure Sky Sword Emperor, such as Su King, Air Emperor, Black Dragon Ancestor, and Zhan Tianxiang Emperor, the one the yellow-robed old man feared the most was the Azure Sky Sword Emperor. This was because he couldn't even escape if he encountered the Azure Sky Sword Emperor. His sword domain could completely trap him. Of course, Su King and Air Emperor were also very powerful. They weren't the slightest bit inferior to the Azure Sky Sword Emperor. The two of them were proficient in spatial profundity. The Azure Sky Sword Emperor's sword domain could only exert some pressure on them. Moreover, they all had their own unique techniques. Especially Su King, he was faintly superior to the rest. The moment Yi Chen's sword domain appeared, the yellow-robed old man immediately knew that the Blackwater Ancestor wouldn't be a match for Yi Chen. Fortunately, Yi Chen's sword domain wasn't as terrifying as the Azure Sky Sword Emperor's. It was only at the early stage third sword domain. Moreover, his battle prowess was far from the Azure Sky Sword Emperor's. As long as he made a move, he could still force the Azure Sky Sword Emperor back. In the blink of an eye, the Blackwater Ancestor's speed was reduced by 10 times under Yi Chen's sword domain. On the other hand, Yi Chen's sword speed had doubled. Bang! Holding the sword with both hands, Yi Chen slashed at Ancestor Blackwater's body 3 times in a row. The first and second strikes shattered Patriarch Blackwater's illusory armor. The third strike caused Patriarch Blackwater's body to tremble violently as though he had been struck by lightning. Immediately, half of his body exploded into a bloody mist. All 3 swords were the heaven-inflicted sword, and they were unleashed at close range. The heaven-inflicted sword had boundless destructive power. Patriarch Blackwater's illusory armor indeed had astonishing defensive power, but it ultimately couldn't compare to the Nirvana Demon Emperor's Mystic Essence Pagoda. The Mystic Essence Pagoda's defensive power couldn't even be broken through by Yuan Emperor's avatar. As for Yi Chen's heaven-inflicted sword, its offensive power seemed inferior to Patriarch Blackwater's true thunder art. However, its ability to penetrate through defense and attack exceeded the true thunder art. With a powerful vibrational force, Yi Chen's first strike caused Patriarch Blackwater's blood to boil and his quintessential essence to turn chaotic. The illusory armor revealed a flaw. The second strike carried an unimaginable vibrational force and broke through the illusory armor in one fell swoop. Without the illusory armor, how could Patriarch Blackwater block the heaven-inflicted sword that could destroy stars with just his supreme-grade battle armor? The terrifying vibrational force passed through the supreme-grade battle armor and into Patriarch Blackwater's body before exploding. It was as though countless bombs had been buried in Patriarch Blackwater's body, completely detonating them. Patriarch Blackwater screamed. With the remaining half of his body borrowing the explosive force, he desperately retreated. He hadn't cultivated to the realm of blood rebirth. Yi Chen's strike not only caused him to lose a large amount of cultivation, but also caused him to suffer fundamental damage. Even if his cultivation recovered, it would take him a year and a half to return to his peak. Yi Chen, don't be impudent. The yellow-robed old man had suffered from the heaven-inflicted sword's destructive power. He stretched his body and shuttled back and forth like a yellow cloud. Seeing that Yi Chen was about to strike again, he flicked his fingers repeatedly. Dozens of finger forces that were as soft as silk wrapped around Yi Chen, flickering with a yellow light. Gold jade silk finger. What a sharp and soft finger force. This silk finger force could cut through gold and break jade. Yi Chen's protective Zhen Yuan couldn't block it at all. Just when the silk finger force was about to cut Yi Chen into pieces, Yi Chen took a step forward. As if he had teleported, he escaped from the Silk Finger Force's entanglement using the Space Profound movement skill. After completing the second style of the heaven-shattering sword arts, Yi Chen's Space Profound movement skill had become even more mysterious. Each of his movements followed the ripples of space, moving freely without any wind. At this moment, even if the Nirvana Demon Emperor at his peak came to kill Yi Chen would still have the confidence to escape. How could the yellow-robed old man's Silk Finger Force do anything to him? You broke my gold jade silk fingers so easily. Good, I wonder how you will break my yellow dragon flying hands next. The yellow-robed old man's huge hand grinded in the void, as if he was spinning a huge millstone. In the next moment, the space was torn apart, and a huge yellow dragon charged at Yi Chen. The yellow dragon moved like a beam of light, and was almost impossible to catch. Yellow dragon flying hands was a martial skill that specialized in speed. It specialized in restraining life and death kings who were too fast to escape. With this skill, the yellow-robed old man had once killed a peak king who had provoked him. Although that peak king was not as powerful as Yi Chen and was proficient in the Space Profound, he was proficient in the Wind Profound and Thunder Profound. With these two profounds as the foundation, he had created a wind-thunder escape art. Ordinary titled monarchs could not do anything to him. Sword Domain, Big Dipper 7-star sword arts, combine. Yi Chen released the third layer of sword domain to the limit, instantly enveloping the yellow-robed old man. At the same time, he threw out his right hand, and the Sky Scorpio sword floated in the air, blossoming with resplendent starlight. As the starlight flickered continuously, 7 different starlight sword images appeared. These 7 sword images formed the Big Dipper 7-star sword arts, brimming with killing intent. Go! As Yi Chen pointed out his right sword finger, 7 sword images flickered and shot out. Like a torrential rain on pear blossoms, the 7 sword images turned into 49 sword images, which then turned illusory and hid in the void. In the next moment, only starlight could be seen flickering, but no sword images could be seen. It was like a sky full of stars, shrouding everything in front of it. Although the huge yellow dragon formed from the palm energy was extremely fast, it was useless in the face of this sword technique that covered the heavens and earth. The countless streaks of sword light that resembled shooting stars slashed at its body, causing it to lose its strength continuously. Just the Big Dipper 7-star sword art alone couldn't be considered as Yi Chen's killing move, and could only be considered as a finishing move. However, with the third layer of sword domain, the Big Dipper 7-star sword art's power and speed increased greatly, and the sword intent it contained was even more concentrated. In short, the sword domain was like an amplifier, greatly increasing the power of the sword control art. Of course, the prerequisite was that the opponent was within the range of the sword domain. Otherwise, the Big Dipper 7-star sword art wouldn't be enough. Unless Yi Chen could cultivate the sword control art to the level of 64 simultaneous swords and then use the 8 trigrams extermination sword art, it would become Yi Chen's killing move even without relying on sword domain. Unfortunately, the sword control art was getting harder and harder to cultivate. According to the legends, there was indeed someone who cultivated the sword control art to the level of 72 simultaneous swords at the Sea of Soul Realm. However, that person only cultivated the sword control art for his entire life, and the others were just supplementary skills. He spent his entire life cultivating the sword control art to the level of 72 simultaneous swords. How many years had Yi Chen cultivated it? Plus, at that time, the defensive sword spell had not been lost, and there were still a lot of people training it. Some of the martial geniuses were standing on the shoulders of the older generation, so it was not strange at all for them to be able to train it quickly. It was just like if there was a senior who had trained the defensive sword spell and told him his experience, he would also be able to train it quickly and reach the realm of 72 or even 81 sword attacks in a short time. Right now, Yi Chen's sword control art had already reached the level of 56 simultaneous swords. He was not far from using the 8 trigrams extermination sword art, only a few steps away. No matter what, only in Yi Chen's hands would the sword control art be able to flourish and become famous. Yi Chen's soul might not be able to stand at the top of the world, but it would at least be the best in this generation. Under the attack of countless meteor sword lights, the huge yellow dragon only lasted for a breath's time before turning into ashes. Swish, swish. The remaining meteor sword lights shot toward the yellow-robed old man, slicing through the space. You're even proficient in the lost sword control art. Moreover, its might is several times greater than the legendary sword control art. Take a look at my great Luo yellow robe. The yellow-robed old man made a prompt decision and tore off his yellow robe. As his Zhen Yuan surged, the yellow robe seemed to be filled with air and expanded unceasingly. In the end, it reached several li in circumference and covered the sky, blocking in front of the yellow-robed old man. As soon as the meteor sword lights came in contact with the huge yellow robe, they disappeared without a trace, unable to deal much damage to the old man. They couldn't even threaten him. A veteran-titled monarch is indeed a veteran-titled monarch. Old ancestor Blackwater can't compare to him. Yi Chen wasn't surprised. As a veteran-titled monarch, the yellow-robed old man definitely had many methods and treasures. After all, the stronger one was, the higher the chance of obtaining treasures. The weaker ones wouldn't even dare to enter dangerous places, so naturally, they wouldn't be able to obtain powerful treasures. With Yi Chen's eyesight, it wasn't hard to tell that the yellow-robed old man's yellow robe should be a mid-tier peak-grade treasure. It wasn't something ordinary peak-grade treasures could compare to. The Big Dipper 7-star sword art didn't pose any threat to the yellow-robed old man. Yi Chen immediately stopped the execution of this sword art. A slit opened on his forehead, and a silver vertical eye appeared. Soul light. Poof. A silver beam of light shot out from the silver vertical eye. The yellow robe could contain qi, but it couldn't contain soul power. The silver beam of light passed through the robe without any obstruction and entered the old man's soul sea. Soul whirlpool. Absorb. The yellow-robed old man didn't guard against Yi Chen's soul attack. However, his reaction wasn't slow either. He immediately condensed a soul whirlpool in his soul sea and sucked in the silver light. Crackle. The silver light's power was immense. It was Yi Chen's innate ability. The soul whirlpool only absorbed half of the silver light's power before it was destroyed. In the next moment, the yellow-robed old man bled from his 7 orifices. His soul was injured. Actually, if he had been prepared earlier, it would have been much better. Unfortunately, the yellow robe was too huge, so he couldn't sense the silver light's arrival immediately. Chapter 949. Yi Chen, how dare you injure my soul? A venomous look flashed across the yellow-robed old man's face. The soul was different from the body. If it was injured, it would be very difficult to recover. If the body was injured, it could be healed with some heavenly materials or some time. For example, if Patriarch Blackwater was injured by Yi Chen, he could recover to his peak in a year or so without any treasures or pills. But if his soul was injured, it was different. Even if he cultivated for 8 to 10 years, he might not be able to recover. Although Yi Chen's soul attack hadn't injured his soul, it had caused cracks to appear in his soul. His powerful cultivation base was starting to show signs of being unable to control it. The soul was too important. It could be said to be a person's origin. Yellow-robed old man, today's matter had nothing to do with you. Since you forcefully interfered, you have to pay a price. What, are you not satisfied? Yi Chen knew that the yellow-robed old man wasn't a good person. Since he had injured him today, he definitely wouldn't let this matter rest. However, Yi Chen himself wasn't a good person either. Great sages always abided by the rule of, if others didn't offend me, I wouldn't offend others. But if someone offended him, even the heavens would make a hole in that person. These words were said with a biting cold killing intent, and a powerful sword intent was activated. Then, with the power of the sword driving heart, he struck out fiercely. The yellow-robed old man groaned. Yi Chen's sword intent and heart sword ability were too powerful. He could actually condense his sword intent into a heart sword and attack the yellow-robed old man's soul. With his soul being attacked, the yellow-robed old man's battle intent fell again and again. It was already not bad if he could use 70 to 80% of his strength. Yi Chen, I hope you don't regret this. The yellow-robed old man actually still had some trump cards that he hadn't used. However, he knew that the current Yi Chen had already matured. Even if he used his trump cards, he wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Instead, he would expose his own trump cards. Furthermore, his soul had been slightly injured. If he didn't immediately think of a way to heal it, it would be too great a side effect on his future cultivation. So, after saying that, the yellow-robed old man ignored Patriarch Blackwater. He directly transformed into a yellow cloud and tore through the void, flying away. The Heavenly King was scared silly. Even Patriarch Blackwater and the yellow-robed old freak, two Thear-cranked monarchs, couldn't do anything to Yi Chen. Instead, they were both injured by him. Now that the yellow-robed old freak had left, how could the Blackwater Alliance stop Yi Chen? Patriarch Blackwater, what do you think? I don't have much time to waste with you. In 3 breaths of time, if you don't tell me where the Blackwater Alliance's Zhenyuan crystal treasury is, I'll kill you. It's not easy for you to cultivate to this level. If you die, you'll die in vain. Yi Chen knew that killing a titled monarch was very difficult. For example, he could only defeat the yellow-robed old freak, but he couldn't kill him. This was because the yellow-robed old freak's cultivation was too profound. Unless he continuously used soul attacks, even if Yi Chen exhausted his Zhenyuan, he still wouldn't be able to kill him. As for Soul Light, Yi Chen could only use it 5 times. After that, he would lose his battle power. If he used it 4 times, he would at most be able to injure the yellow-robed old freak's soul, just like the Nirvana Demon Emperor. Moreover, the yellow-robed old freak definitely had more trump cards. If he wanted to kill him, Yi Chen only had 60% confidence. However, Patriarch Blackwater wasn't the yellow-robed old freak. Yi Chen had more than 90% confidence in killing him. You dare. As his flesh squirmed, Patriarch Blackwater's missing half of his body rapidly recovered. Hearing Yi Chen's threat, Patriarch Blackwater's face turned green, and his expression turned sinister. You tell me if I dare or not. As the sword domain enveloped Patriarch Blackwater, Yi Chen raised his right hand, and the Sky Scorpio sword shot out a 10-meter-long purple sword chi, which swept past Patriarch Blackwater's waist. The sword domain's restriction on Patriarch Blackwater was too strong, and Yi Chen's attack, in the sword domain, had doubled in both speed and power. Patriarch Blackwater only had time to move a dozen steps before he was fiercely brushed by the purple sword chi. With the protection of the supreme grade battle armor, the purple sword chi couldn't cut through. However, the powerful vibrating power wasn't something the armor could completely block. With a puff, Patriarch Blackwater's waist exploded into a bloody mist, and blood splashed out through the gaps of the armor. With the amplification of the sword domain, Yi Chen's heaven-inflicted sword had a huge destructive power against kings of the same realm. Patriarch Blackwater screamed miserably. He roared, Yi Chen, my cultivation base is over 1,500 years, and I can endlessly use the undying body to recover. You can't kill me. Blood Lightning Escape. The Sanguine Lightning Escape was an escape technique recorded in the Heavy Water True Thunder art. It allowed Patriarch Blackwater to escape countless calamities. With a whoosh, Patriarch Blackwater transformed into a sanguine bolt of lightning and shot into the distance. Let's see if your Blood Lightning Escape is stronger or my Orbital Step is stronger. Orbital Step was a space-profound movement skill created by Yi Chen based on the second style of the heaven-shattering sword arts. Its movement path was the same as the ripples of space, which was why it was called Orbital Step. Taking a step forward, Yi Chen's figure directly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already behind Blackwater Ancestor's blood-colored lightning. His speed was unimaginable. Sword domain, maximum range. A majestic sword pressure was released, and the blood-colored lightning slightly paused. Kill. Without showing any mercy, Yi Chen slashed over. With a crack, the blood-colored lightning was split into 2, and Patriarch Blackwater tumbled out with a pale face. One of his right arms was gone, and blood splattered everywhere. Yi Chen, you are going too far. If I had known this would happen, I would have personally taken action and killed you to prevent any future troubles. Patriarch Blackwater felt despair. Even the blood lightning escape couldn't escape from Yi Chen's pursuit. He had no other means left. Stubborn fool. Big Dipper 7-star sword arts. Yi Chen was a little angry. This old man wouldn't repent until he saw his coffin. There was no need to be polite with him. Countless meteor sword beams shot out towards Patriarch Blackwater. Patriarch Blackwater was about to circulate his cultivation technique and condense an illusory armor, but Yi Chen was one step ahead of him. A soul light struck his sea of soul, making him unable to control his quintessential essence. Clang, clang. Patriarch Blackwater was sent tumbling by the meteor sword beams, and his quintessential essence flowed rapidly. The Big Dipper 7-star sword arts was a powerful sword art among the imperial sword arts. As long as Yi Chen didn't stop, he could use it forever. In the void, only meteors could be seen. Stop, quickly stop. I will tell you where the quintessential essence crystal treasury is. Patriarch Blackwater was afraid. Not only was his quintessential essence flowing rapidly, but his injuries were also worsening. Yi Chen's destruction sword intent was a great counter to the undying body, and it became more obvious as time went on. Take me there now. Yi Chen stopped attacking. Alliance Master, are we really going to take him to the quintessential essence crystal treasury? Sky King transmitted to Patriarch Blackwater. Patriarch Blackwater replied coldly, let him be arrogant for a while. When he leaves, I will immediately join forces with the Demon God Cult, Black Fiend Island, and Old Monster Redwater to attack the Yi clan. Sky King hesitated and said, Xianhou and Demon Flower Emperor will definitely help him. It won't be easy to deal with him. Our Blackwater alliance is already established. We need to join forces with more titled monarchs. Didn't Patriarch Golden Turtle say he wants half of the devoured islands? I will agree to it. Patriarch Golden Turtle? Sky King jumped in fright. The Golden Turtle Old Ancestor was an old antique who had not appeared in the world for a very long time. Not many people knew of him. The outside world only knew of the Void Emperor, and other famous titled monarchs. Little did they know that among the titled monarchs, the Golden Turtle Old Ancestor was definitely a character several times stronger than the Void Emperor. 100 years ago, the Golden Turtle Old Ancestor had once made a move and sent the powerful Battle Heaven's Elephant Emperor flying several thousand miles away, shocking the entire monarch realm. This time, Patriarch Golden Turtle came out of seclusion and sent a messenger over to ask Blackwater Alliance to hand over half of the devoured islands. Patriarch Blackwater was a bit hesitant, but now he had no other choice. With Patriarch Golden Turtle taking action, whether it's Demon Flower Emperor or Xianhou, they are nothing to worry about. Alliance Master is wise. Sky King looked at Yi Chen with a trace of pity. Forcing me to make a choice. This time, I want him to spit out everything he took. I heard that the Yi clan still has 81 spirit veins. I will take them all. Blackwater Alliance's Zhenyuan Crystal Treasury wasn't on Blackwater Island, but at the bottom of the sea far away from it. It was covered in a large amount of silt, and under the silt was a naturally formed rock layer. Inside the rock layer, there was a formation with a soul stone as the core. It was easy to ignore it with soul power. If not for Patriarch Blackwater leading the way, Yi Chen definitely wouldn't be able to find this place. Entering the Zhenyuan Crystal Treasury, Yi Chen finally knew how rich Blackwater Alliance was. Not only were there mountains of Zhenyuan crystals, there were also countless upper-grade spirit stones, and even a lot of extreme-grade spirit stones. Without any hesitation, Yi Chen directly plundered all the Zhenyuan crystals. After a rough count, there were at least 30 million quintessence crystals here. 2 million quasi-low-grade Zhenyuan crystals could increase Yi Chen's cultivation base by 50 years. 30 million quasi-low-grade Zhenyuan crystals could increase his cultivation base by more than 750 years. Adding Yi Chen's original cultivation base, it was more or less 1,000 years. There was still a big gap between 1,000 years of cultivation base and 1,000 years of cultivation base. 1,000 years of cultivation base meant that one's cultivation base wouldn't be too weak, and rarely would one run out of Zhenyuan. Even if one encountered someone with a higher cultivation base, one would at least have the confidence to fight back. Otherwise, with Yi Chen's 200 years of cultivation base, he would be easily exhausted by his opponent. After all, which titled monarch didn't have 1,000 years of cultivation base? Watching from the side, Patriarch Blackwater felt a bit regretful. If he had known earlier, he would have promised Yi Chen to give him 3 million Zhenyuan crystals a year. It should be known that these 30 million Zhenyuan crystals were decades of savings of Blackwater Alliance. Although the Devouring Island could produce 20 to 30 million Zhenyuan crystals a year, at least half of it was given to Life and Death Kings who knew about it. The remaining 90% was divided among the 20 Life and Death Kings of Blackwater Alliance. Under normal circumstances, it would be good if Patriarch Blackwater could save 2 million Zhenyuan crystals a year. The increase of cultivation base requires a more powerful mind and soul. In a short period of time, he can only use a few million Zhenyuan crystals at most. Patriarch Blackwater comforted himself. He didn't believe that Yi Chen could convert 30 million Zhenyuan crystals into cultivation base at once. It was almost impossible. Ancestor Blackwater roared and cracked the quintessential essence crystal treasury with a palm strike. Seawater surged in through the cracks. Kill him. Heavenly King was also very aggrieved. He watched helplessly as Yi Chen plundered all the wealth of the Blackwater Alliance. Although this wealth had nothing to do with him, he was envious. He never expected Patriarch Blackwater to have so much wealth. Alliance Master, are we going to Golden Turtle Island now? The Sky King asked. Patriarch Blackwater took a few deep breaths and said with a gloomy voice, I want to recover my soul injury first, then go to Golden Turtle Island to discuss the matter of destroying the Yi family and killing Yi Chen. The soul injury could not be delayed for even a moment. It was related to Patriarch Blackwater's future. Fortunately, the Blackwater Alliance was a big family, and there were still some treasures that could heal soul injuries. As for dealing with Yi Chen, this matter would have to be planned out in the long run. He did not want to teach the latter a lesson and make him spit out all the resources he had swallowed. He wanted to completely kill Yi Chen and destroy the entire Yi family. The men would be killed by 1,000 cuts and thrown into the ocean to feed the fish, and the women would all be beaten into slaves. Yi Chen is dead for sure this time. Once Golden Turtle Ancestor makes a move, how can he survive? Sky King seemed to be able to see the scene of Yi Chen's unwillingness to die. Returning to the Yi family in South Ridra region, Yi Chen immediately went into closed-door training and started refining Zhenyuan crystals to increase his cultivation base. This was a spacious stone room. The length and width of the room were each more than 300 feet, and the height was more than 10 feet. There were lamps hanging on the walls, and in the center of the room, there was a square stone platform with a navy blue praying mat placed on it. Sitting on the cushion, Yi Chen rubbed his storage ring with his fingers. Suddenly, a huge amount of Zhenyuan crystals poured out, forming a small hill beside the stone platform. I wonder if these 30 million Zhenyuan crystals can reach my saturation limit. No one could endlessly increase their cultivation base, and it was impossible for Yi Chen. Without a powerful mental state and soul, even if one refined 100 million Zhenyuan crystals into Zhenyuan, the Zhenyuan would leak out and scatter in the world, which would be a waste of effort. Normally, a Life and Death King who had just entered Life and Death realm would not have more than 100 years of cultivation base. Geniuses would not have more than 300 years of cultivation base. After reaching the saturation limit, one would have to slowly increase the mental state and soul strength. For example, if one only had the strength of 100 gene, but after going through arduous training, it would become 150 gene, 200 gene, and even more. This required a process and could not be accomplished in one go. However, Yi Chen not only had a powerful mental state and soul, but his martial art was also a heaven realm martial art, which was top-notch in every aspect. This meant that he would be able to bear more cultivation base, but where his limit was, even Yi Chen did not know. Begin refining. With a wave of his hand, more than 100,000 Zhenyuan crystals floated above Yi Chen's head. With the circulation of green lotus sword arts, a powerful Zhenyuan wrapped around these crystals and rapidly refined them. After attaining the undying body-flesh derivation realm, Yi Chen's entire body could store Zhen Yuan except for the Sea of Soul. Of course, the Dantian could store the most Zhen Yuan. Only after reaching the blood rebirth realm would the Dantian gradually lose its function and become indistinguishable from the other parts. 100,000 Zhen Yuan crystals. 500,000 Zhen Yuan crystals. 2 million Zhen Yuan crystals. Zhen Yuan crystals were excessively pure. With just a bit of refining, they could be converted into Zhen Yuan. In a short 2 hours, Yi Chen's cultivation base increased by another 50 years, surpassing 300 years. The refining continued. 350 years of cultivation base. 400 years of cultivation base. 600 years of cultivation base. A horrifying aura filled up the entire stone room. If it were not for the fact that the stone room was covered with a restriction, it would not be able to handle the powerful pressure from Yi Chen's body at all. Soon, Yi Chen's cultivation base surpassed 800 years. It seemed like there was no limit on Yi Chen's body. His cultivation base increased faster and faster, showing no signs of slowing down at all. 900 years. 1,000 years. Boom. The stone room shook slightly. The light on the surface kept flashing. This was a sign that the aura was so powerful that it clashed with the restriction. 1,050 years. 1,080 years. In the end, Yi Chen's cultivation base stopped at 1,080 years. It was not because Yi Chen had reached his limit, but because the 30 million Zhen Yuan crystals had been used up. Opening his eyes, Yi Chen slowly let out a mouthful of turbid qi. This mouthful of turbid qi was so powerful that it even melted part of the restriction on the stone room's surface, making a sizzling sound. 1,080 years of cultivation base is actually not my limit. Yi Chen smiled bitterly. Then he burst out with a heroic spirit. This meant that he could continue to use external items to raise his cultivation base. With his current cultivation base, although he was still at the bottom among titled monarchs, his potential was limitless. Sooner or later, he would surpass 2,000 years, or even 3,000 years, and reach the level of the Dragon King. Clenching his fist tightly, Yi Chen felt a volcanic eruption of energy rushing to the center of his fist. The level of one's cultivation base did not have much of an impact on one's battle prowess. However, it did not mean that there was no impact at all. The higher one's cultivation base, the more Zhen Yuan each move would contain. Their battle prowess would more or less increase. At this moment, Yi Chen's battle prowess had reached a whole new level. All of a sudden, Yi Chen felt his consciousness becoming clearer. Without using any soul power, he could clearly feel the subtle changes of the heaven and earth, the undulations of the air, the fluctuations of the restriction's power. Everything was vivid in his mind. The flowers and grasses outside the stone room were growing tenaciously. When the wind blew through the leaves, it transmitted an imperceptible energy into the room. He could even feel a trace of the undulations in the depths of the earth. My cultivation base has suddenly increased by several times, allowing me to experience the changes of this world. Yi Chen suddenly understood. Life was like a magnetic field. When one was weak, the magnetic field would be too weak, and the outside world would be hazy. One would need to use the naked eye to see and observe. The spirit body was just a body, and it did not have the advantage of observing the outside world. On the other hand, cultivation base was what a person had the most contact with the outside world. This was because cultivation base was transformed from the Yuan Qi of the world, and it was the bridge between humans and the world. 1,000 years of cultivation base could be said to be a checkpoint for life and death kings. After crossing it, a whole new world would appear before Yi Chen's eyes. Defensive sword art. Pensive, Yi Chen's thoughts moved, and the Sky Scorpio sword floated out, splitting into 3, then 60, 62, 64, 66. Unknowingly, Yi Chen's defensive sword art had already surpassed the level of 64 swords, and he could already use the 8 trigrams extermination sword art. Apart from this, Yi Chen could clearly feel that his soul's strength was increasing. The amount of soul didn't change, but the soul's strength increased. This was a qualitative improvement. For example, although the soul of Yuan Emperor's doppelganger was not much, its quality was too frightening. It could use a powerful soul attack like Primordial Spirit Lock to obliterate the opponent's soul source. On the other hand, Yi Chen's soul attack could only injure the opponent's soul. Among life and death kings, there were strong and weak souls. The increase in quantity was very slow, but the increase in quality could be a bit faster. The strengthening of the soul was closely related to the increase in cultivation base. After each saturation, the process of breaking through the limit was also the process of the soul strengthening. If the soul didn't strengthen, how could it bear more cultivation base? Of course, Yi Chen was an exception. He hadn't reached the saturation limit, but because his cultivation base had suddenly increased from 200 years to 1,000 years, the improvement was too huge, causing a change in his soul. Before, Yi Chen's soul hadn't been completely aroused. Just like the majority of people's brains, some people were smart because their brains were developed to a high degree. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.